when the world is at war and children go hungry, when there is no justice, no peace, when the night is long and your heart is hurting, remember God's promise. Even when it seems like the end, all is not lost. Hold fast hope.
Today we wrap up our two-part series about hope in difficult times. Last week, Brian reminded us what our faith teaches about God being the source of our hope. This week, we're going to explore what hope looks like in a tangible, real-life, day-to-day way. We start with a story that you might be familiar with. A story about bread and fish and thousands of hungry people in the middle of nowhere. A story that appears in all four Gospels, the only story besides the crucifixion and resurrection to do so. The Gospel writers each found this story so important that they had to include it in their telling of the life of Jesus. So we're going to listen to them today and try to understand why they wanted us to hear it. Each gospel tells the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000 a little differently, but the major themes and details are the same. Jesus had recently sent his disciples out in pairs to teach people in towns all across the region. While they were out, King Herod executed well-known prophet John the Baptist for a host of reasons, but mostly because John the Baptist told Herod that he was doing something wrong. The disciples buried John, who was also Jesus' cousin, and returned to share the news of his death with Jesus. Upon hearing about the execution, Jesus got on a boat to go somewhere quiet, where he could be alone with his disciples. Instead, people from all the surrounding towns and villages heard that he was near, and they ran ahead to meet him when the boat finally came to shore. Honestly, this sounds like my worst nightmare. Imagine just wanting some peace and quiet with your closest friends while you grieve, and instead you get crowds of people clamoring to meet you. I would be frustrated and annoyed, maybe even a little short with them. Jesus, however, looks on the crowd, really sees each of their faces, their expressions of joy, confusion, curiosity, grief, desperation, and hope. And instead of running away or sending them away, Scripture says he looked at them and he had compassion for them. So he stayed and spent long hours healing and teaching. The exhausted disciples come up to him as the sun gets lower in the sky and urge him to send the crowd away to get something to eat because it's getting late and people are hungry, themselves included. Jesus just looks at them and says, they don't need to go away. You give them something to eat. In every gospel, the disciples look at Jesus with disbelief and ask him how he could possibly expect them to feed more than 5,000 people when it would cost half a year's wages and they are in the middle of nowhere. Jesus stands firm and once again tells them to figure out what they have and how they can use it. After some scrambling, they manage to find 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. They bring the food to Jesus and he has them divide the crowd into groups of 50. Once the people are seated, Jesus lifts the bread and the fish into the air, blesses them, and tells the disciples to go distribute the food to the people. Miraculously, there is enough food for everyone, so much, in fact, that there are 12 baskets of leftovers. This story has confounded me since I first heard it as a child. I have so many questions, mainly, how? How did Jesus turn 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish into a feast for 5,000 people? Was it an infinite loaf of bread where everyone took a piece and it never got smaller? Did bread and fish just start appearing in front of the people like those stories about manna raining down from heaven in the Old Testament? How? I need to know. I'm not the only person to have questions, and plenty of biblical scholars and preachers have tried to explain this miracle over the years. There are those who believe that Jesus literally multiplied the loaves and fish. And there are those who believe that the generosity of the person who gave those first loaves and fish inspired everyone else to share the food they had tucked away until everyone had something to eat, which is a miracle of its own kind. As much as I would like to spend the rest of this sermon trying to figure out exactly how this miracle worked, that would be an exercise in missing the point. The gospel writers don't care how it happened. They are trying to tell a bigger story, a story where Jesus saw 5,000 hungry people and didn't think twice about taking care of them, a story where a little turns out to be more than enough, a story that invited the disciples to work together to solve a problem, to participate in a miracle instead of waiting around for someone else to swoop in and save the day. A story about hope. Lately, it feels like hope is in short supply. On the world stage, we watch endless wars, violence in our streets against immigrants, natural disasters that damage homes and leave people without basic necessities for weeks. We hear racist rhetoric that declares that if you are anything except white, you are less than, and don't deserve rights and to be treated with dignity. On a personal level, things don't feel much better. We've lost jobs, received scary health diagnoses, and find ourselves grieving the deaths of our loved ones. We're struggling with our body image, our mental health, our sense of purpose in life. We're arguing with our spouses, overwhelmed by our kids, and frustrated with our friends. We could really use some hope right about now. Real hope, the kind that sustains and nourishes our souls, the kind that means something, the kind of hope that isn't just a good mood, the kind that propels us forward. Hope is one of those concepts that's difficult to put into words. You can't explain it, but you know what it feels like when you have hope, and you know what it feels like when you don't. Let's give it a shot, though. Hope is more than a feeling. It's an expectation, a belief that something will happen. Hope is ultimately a belief in the future, that tomorrow will come, that things will get better, that change is possible, and one day things will be different. And believing in a future helps us survive and thrive in the present. So often we feel hopeless because we stop believing in the future. We stop believing that things can and will get better or change one day. And if there's nothing good to look forward to in the future, then how are we supposed to keep going in the present? Hope helps us imagine that there is a future worth fighting for, worth creating, worth sticking around to experience. Hope helps us see that there is good in the world and in our lives, no matter how small, and that there will always be good. If finding that kind of hope sounds like a tall order, you're not wrong. When we look around at all the painful and difficult things that are happening in the world and our lives, we can start to feel like the disciples looking out at that hungry crowd of thousands, overwhelmed. How could they be expected to help so many when what they had to offer, 5 loaves and 2 fish, was so small? But Jesus isn't afraid of small. In fact, Jesus intentionally uses small to show the disciples what is possible in this moment. Reverend Gail Song Bantam points out that Jesus tells the disciples to break the crowd up into groups of 50 because Jesus knows that everything seems more overwhelming, more impossible when we're looking at it in the macro. In the micro, the small groups, things are more manageable. And let's assume for a moment that Jesus didn't perform this miracle by literally multiplying the 5 loaves and 2 fish in thousands of loaves and thousands of fish. Let's assume that the miracle was something smaller. Groups of 50 people turning to each other and introducing themselves, making jokes about their kids or their jobs or the weather. Groups of 50 people grumbling about how hungry they are, but how they're not ready to leave this place just yet. They're not ready to walk away from this sacred moment. And so someone pipes up and says, I've got a few slices of bread, and someone else has some fish, and someone else has olives, and someone else has cheese, and on until eventually they've all shared what they have and discover they have enough for everyone to have something to eat. No one has to leave. They can all sit together and continue talking, continue connecting, and can stay here on this holy ground for a little bit longer. The miracle starts with something small. Someone sharing some bread and fish, and with each person that offers up what little they have, it grows and grows until more than 5,000 people eat and have leftovers. We often believe that big grief, big fear, big despair can only be countered with big hope. You know what big hope is. It's that rare moment when something big happens and you are filled to the brim, consumed with this feeling, this knowledge that maybe everything will be okay. Sometimes big hope is a collective feeling sweeping all of us up in its wake at the same time. But those moments of big hope are rare. And if we look closely, we'll see that big hope is actually just a bunch of small hopes in a trench coat. Big hope is just a bunch of small hopes multiplying and building on each other over time. What a relief. I can do small hope, and you can too. That's the beauty of small hope. It's small, it's manageable, it's never in short supply because it doesn't require some big epiphany or miracle moment. Small hope simply asks us to pay attention to life around us, to notice the ordinary miracles right in front of us. For me, small hope is laying on the floor, flipping through a scholastic book catalog with a friend's daughter as she talks about all the books she likes and wants to read. It's listening very seriously to another friend's son as he explains the rules to a game I don't understand but want to play with him. It's my neighbor knocking on my door at Christmas to offer me a small present, expecting nothing in return. It's sunny days after weeks of snow and ice. It's my cat waking me up in the middle of the night to present me with a toy she so thoughtfully hunted for me. Small hope is gathering with a group of strangers in a church basement on a random Tuesday night to learn how to care for our immigrant neighbors here in Louisville. It's 3 carloads worth of gloves, socks, and blankets collected for our homeless neighbors right before the winter storm. It's congregation members spending their Valentine's Day packing meals with Love the Hungry for people around the world who need it. It's volunteers showing up every Sunday morning to play music, teach children, open doors, and make sure the sound system works. It's Stephen ministers walking alongside people going through some of the worst moments of their lives so they don't have to do it alone. It's a church member who was heartbroken by violence and injustice in our city and started volunteering with a local organization to do something about it. It's all these things and so many more. In fact, as I was writing this list of examples and then editing it down because it got long, I started to feel some big hope creep in. I wasn't even looking for big hope. I was looking for small hopes. But that's how it works. Small hopes multiply like loaves and fish. And we get to not only receive small hopes, we get to create those hopes for other people. Embody them in our everyday acts of love, using what we have, even if it feels insignificant or like it's not enough. Jesus certainly thinks our loaves and fish are enough, so we need to start believing it too. I like how Reverend Adrian Thorne puts it. Your obedience to the God of love is never a waste of time. We may not heal the world, but let's not pretend our small acts are not building the world God envisioned day by day. She's right. None of us is capable of solving all of the world's big problems on our own. And the big changes we long for will not happen overnight, and some maybe not even in our lifetime. But we can find hope in the fact that every small act of love, of justice, of generosity adds up. And as those small acts multiply, things build and change until eventually that moment of big change and big hope happens. We can find hope in the fact that our small offerings are not a waste of time or energy. We can find hope in knowing that, like the disciples in front of that hungry crowd, we do not have to wait for the miracle. We can participate in it. Amen.